Hello, welcome. Welcome to Independence Hall in Philadelphia. My name is Alexander Hamilton. If I may be of assistance in any way, please do not hesitate to let me know. A couple of brief words about our room here. And I'm sorry, it seems like you were trying to talk, not hear anything.
I'm fine, thank you.
Certainly. We have a play called Debating Independence, which is upcoming here on President's Day on February 20th, which is sure to be an exciting event as we role play the debates that existed here in June of 76. It's very interesting for me, for I was not here. I was actually a soldier in New York City at the time. Later on July 10th, eventually, I was able to hear the product of the declaration, which is proclaimed here in this room, as it was read aloud in New York City at the Common, where I was serving with the general at the time. For me, this room became a lot more important when my endeavors for us to seek a more perfect union, a better form of government than that which existed, called the Articles of Confederation. I worked through the Annapolis Convention, eventually bore fruit, and I was able to get enough delegates here to eventually find a quorum, eventually creating what's called the Constitutional Convention, where we were able to separate out some powers from the states uniquely then to the federal government in creating a strong federal government under the framework which still exists today. But of course, myself, as the first Secretary of the Treasury, I was instrumental in creating your monetary system, as well as the faith of the American dollar. If you have any questions at all about any bit of finance or government or history, uh, please don't hesitate to let me know. I always like to talk about the things that you are interested in. And where do you come from?
Arizona.
Oh, very nice, out in West.
Yes.
Not too far from you. Was some territory that the vice president under Thomas Jefferson, by the name of Aaron Burr, after him and I had our last encounter, which ended fatefully, unfortunately for me, and fatally as well. He actually went off a couple of years later to try to create a country somewhere out by you, areas that was Mexico and Texas and whatnot. But eventually it came that the general in charge of the area really got cold feet and decided not to follow along on this scheme of tyranny. And so Aaron Burr was tried for treason for this endeavor. But alas, he got off on those charges, just like he got off on the charges of murdering me. Are you interested in American history at all?
I have been.
Interesting. And your part about it. You like to for me to enlighten you as to its founding ideas, not so much at how it exists today. That's for you to interpret and be a part of.
Not really.
Well, there is an interesting story which does relay a little bit into, for example, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms and to have a well-regulated militia. It's a story which is might be of interest because of the topic is still so important today. Not so much for the well-regulated militias, but the right to bear arms. And just to give you a wee bit of insight into the origin for the strong feelings behind this, there was the first major battle of the American Revolution. It's often referred to just by the names of the towns which were in this sway: Lexington and Concord, which happened in April of 1775, the 19th to be precise. So the story about that, where the British regulars were on the search for some of the patriotic ringleaders, or the ringleaders of the Sons of Liberty, as well as the ammunition, the powder, the shots, and the muskets that were being stored up as well in the surrounding areas. But what we often don't associate with that time is on the very same night which soldiers started forth from Boston out to Lexington and Concord, down in Virginia, a different colony completely in Massachusetts. Virginia is huge in size. In fact, if you were to take all 13 colonies together, Virginia would amount to 20% of it, a fifth of the size. The land actually went all the way out to the Mississippi River and then further up to the Great Lakes, going behind our present day Pennsylvania, for example. And there, the capital was Williamsburg. Williamsburg is a genteel town, not a very large town, but as the capital of Virginia, it is where the Lord Governor had his office, who was the king's representative, as well as, but of course, a much, much, much smaller contingent of soldiers. So they were not dealing with the same problems down in Virginia as they were in New York and up in Boston. For really, that's where most of the rabble rousers, as they would say, have been meeting the Sons of Liberty ever since 1765. But the interesting thing that happened on that fateful night was that the powder magazine was illegally raided by the king's men. You see, the powder magazine is still a very prominent building in the center of Williamsburg, and the purpose of it is to serve as the arsenal for the population. Most people that live in a city do not need to have a musket of their own, or they're probably engaged in trade. It's not like a farmer who's out in the wilderness who a musket is really a necessity for living. So the townsfolk, if they felt that they were under any foreign force, pirates, Spanish, French, the Indians, or brigands, they can go to the powder magazine and get musket and shot and powder and put them together and then defend the city. This money that pays for these items is actually taken up by the local taxes of the people. For just as this is part of the state house for the state of Pennsylvania, every state house in each colony would levy taxes upon its citizens for all domestic needs. And the taxes that we raised in Virginia paid for those arms. And so when they were illegally confiscated down in Virginia, a town which had no problems with rebel uprisings, no problems with Sons of Liberty meetings, no one standard in really creating an upset to society, but still there was a need to disarm the largest colony. So it's interesting how, if you look at each colony and you look at the actual physical layout of how the city is, where the barracks of the soldiers are located, where the powder magazine is located, the store. For example, in New York, it was simply not possible for the king's men to raid the powder magazine. For it was, though it wasn't, the powder magazine was in close relationship to the upper barracks. Both of them are located in what today is called the Common, or I should say City Hall Park today. In the 18th century, it was referred to as the Common. The Sons of Liberty had a tavern which was located directly across from the powder magazine, on Thames Tavern. And the British regulars have had a long history with New York of confrontation. In fact, that we've had the first armed battle with the regulars even before the Boston Massacre in March of 1770. In January of 1770, the very first fighting of the Revolutionary War took place in New York at the Battle of Golden Hill. So there was a long history in New York of the Sons of Liberty stepping up and engaged and defending their liberty point blank with the soldiers in open confrontation. And it is something that has brewed in New York for a great many years before the endeavors in April of 75. It was actually even declared illegal for the soldiers to be out at night if they were unescorted by an officer, because no good can come of them. That they are not our police force. They are really just there on a well, not really to our benefit. Really, we really don't want them there. If anything, they should be out west and even moving the demarcation line further out west in order to enable more immigrants that are coming here and more servants who are indentured, who are released from their bonds to go out west and to claim land. But that is really the American dream. Once you have land, you have a vote. Once you have a vote, and your voice matters. Your place in society matters. You, as a human being, your voice, your concerns, your mind matters. You have a vote. Very few people were entitled to the vote. In all the colonies, as well as in Great Britain in the 18th century, there was a property requirement, which put about the same percentage of the population of London to the colonies at 3% of the population who could vote. So it's interesting when you think about the old battle cry, no taxation without representation. This was the main battle cry that we put forth in 1765 because we, the men here in the colonies, our vote was not being heard in Parliament. And though Parliament has let us conduct our own affairs domestically for the last 160 years, the Parliament has now placed a tax upon us without our consent. We ask that we get a representative in Parliament because that is our right as British citizens. It's according to the Constitution. It is written as plain as day. It should not make a difference if we live in England or if we live in Pennsylvania. There is enough of a population center here that we matter. And we've been engaged in creating our own lives out of the wilderness for so long that we have the confidence that we know how to lead ourselves because we've been doing it successfully. But once we, the 3% who could vote, were being treated like the 97% who could not, well, that is something we had to rectify. Might seem interesting that it is such a popular cry. If only 3% of the people can vote, why would it become a rallying cry? No taxation without representation. Because of the argument that America is the place where you could gain your voice. If you were born poor in Europe, you were probably going to die poor. There was no upward mobility in life. The best case scenario, maybe you can find an apprenticeship, but eventually to fulfill for the requirements of being a white male over the age of 18 who owned property. That property could be items like books if you're a lawyer, as well as belong to the Church of England. So then you can get the right to vote. So many people that came over to the New World, especially in this Pennsylvania, which was created on an idea of religious freedom. So they took away the requirement for the Church of England quite early on, though many other religions still had to pay a tiff to the local church just to survive in the community, such is the power of the 18th century church. But if you were to able to get here to the New World, probably if you were born poor in Europe, you would indenture yourself, which is legally giving yourself as property to someone for the course of 7 to 12 years. And then after your indentured servitude was over, probably, hopefully, as due your contract, you would be afforded money or perchance a skill, a trade, which would basically lead to your upward mobility, or land in itself, just by giving you a tract of land from the patent holder's grand estate. But any of those would then give you that voice, that right to vote. Something which, if you lived in Europe, you would not have, and you know your children would not have, and their children would not have, just as your father, grandfather, and great grandfather did not have the right to vote back home. So, coming here to the new world, it is where you can, by your own wits and intuition and perseverance and ingenuity, create something out of your own life and hence get the right to vote. That's one of the great ideas that brought so many people to the shores of America. Then, of course, when we had to create our government, that is where I put my expertise forth. When I was with the coalition from New York, in order to help debate what would eventually come out as your bicameral branch of the legislature and your president and Supreme Court. But alas, do you have any questions about any of that?
Not at the moment.
I'd like to remind you that there is a upcoming play on February 20th, which will take part in this room. So we are going to lose this room in 40 days. So we'd like to get as much educational benefit out of this room as possible. Hopefully, we'll be able to find some school teachers who will be able to, or administrators, or those interested in the study of education and how it may be applied using virtual reality. Well, this would be a fantastic example for them to partake in. We've actually done it once already, back in last July. And it was really quite a nice affair. We had about 16 actors all together, people playing the different roles of the different colonies. And everything was primary sourced material, meaning everything that was stated was something that was written down in the 18th century in the Continental Congress. So it really is quite a lovely experience.
I'm going to put it on my calendar.
And we should have our video up already from last July 4th's debating independence.
Here in Altspace?
Yes, this is Altspace.
Right, but the video, you said that was up. Is that in Altspace or
Ah,
is that on YouTube?
apologies. YouTube.
Okay, I'll have to look for it.
Yes, and I am Alexander Hamilton live. So following that, you should be able to quite easily find the channel and the video. I'm hopeful that it is up. And to tell you the truth, I've been posting a lot of videos, and I'm not 100% sure that it is. So if you by chance don't see it today, I'll wait a day or two, and then it'll definitely be there.
Okay, thank you.
It is 4:20 now. Now I'm actually off to go to Horizon in order to bring Alex Hamilton to a. Thank you, and the same to you. It's been a pleasure talking with you.